Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Rachel Christensen. She is a sacred feminine manifestation expert, author, and energy healer who works with light beings to facilitate deep spiritual change. She supports people in breaking free from limitations to step into their true power. In this episode, we'll explore the unseen forces influencing our awakening and what it truly means to remember who we are. Rachel, welcome to the program.
Hi, nice to be here.
It's good to have you here. So tell us, what exactly is the divine or the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, for that matter?
The divine and sacred, they're very similar. So the sacred specifically represents the sacred qualities in all aspects of life and nature. It really connects to the essence quality intertwined with like ancient wisdom and earthly expression. Whereas divine is more operating on the spiritual spectrum, so the universal and collective energy. Now, when we talk about this in relation to the feminine and the masculine, we live in a polarized reality. Without contrast, we don't really know how one thing can exist. And I'll give you an example. Without joy, how do we know what sadness is, and vice versa? There's light and dark, up and down. So there's polarization everywhere and duality. So with the sacred masculine and feminine, these are two types of energy that exist on two ends of the spectrum, like yin and yang. So when we're talking about the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, these are energies that exist not only within us, but within the collective energetic field.
It seems to be that there's an imbalance between the two, because if we go back to ancient Egypt and even before that, it seems to be that maybe the balance was a little bit different than it is now.
Yes, it's actually something that happened over thousands of years. It was the systematic oppression of the sacred feminine as patriarchal societies began to arise. So around 5,000 years ago, we transitioned from matricentric societies, and that's where we revered nature's cycle, feminine wisdom. There's a lot of worshipping of pagan gods and goddesses, and we shifted to more patriarchal systems that were rooted in land ownership. What we saw was land being passed from fathers to sons, and then bodies became property for women. So they were literally used to harbour sons and heirs. And there's also the commodification of wombs. So what we actually see thousands of years later in today's time is that there's still commodification of women's appearance and nurturing qualities in media and workplaces. As an example, beauty standards and unrealistic beauty standards and the over-sexualization of women's bodies. And then there's also another quality that's revered in patriarchal society is the endless nurturing, like the Mother Mary archetype, where there's this expectation to be offering like free emotional labor. These qualities that we see in modern day society, it's over, like they were generated and developed over thousands of years of oppression.
You mentioned Mother Mary a moment ago, and it reminds me of something that I've been hearing a lot in the past year, which is Mary Magdalene consciousness. Does that have anything to do with the balance coming back into where it should be, or is that something completely different altogether?
It's different because there's types of consciousness that exist within the field, and as we awaken, we might gain access to these frequencies and these consciousness and begin to embody and essentially download them. So, for instance, it's possible to begin to download and receive transmissions from Christ consciousness. So a lot of these figures that you see, both from a historical and mythological perspective, the consciousness, it still exists within the field because everything is energy. Whether we can access it or not depends on whether our systems are in alignment with that frequency, and essentially the stars are aligned for us to begin to open and receive that transmission.
Now, you mentioned something about unseen forces that have something to do with our awakening. What exactly are they?
There's lots of unseen forces that impact our awakening, and it's essentially everything that we're unconscious to, and there's a lot that we're not. I'll give you an example that 95% of our thoughts are actually driven by subconscious. So from one aspect, if we're talking about a 3D consensus reality, there's a lot of subconscious patterns which impact the way that the lens that we see the world. Then on a spiritual standpoint, some of the unseen forces could be energetic blocks, the way that trauma is held within our system. Beyond that, when we start to enter the more woo-woo spiritual angle, that's things like past life processes, karmic processes, and even psychic energy, because we live in a world that is based on energy and the exchange of energy. A lot of the unseen forces are energetic patterns which relate to everything that I just mentioned.
And some of them can come from past lives, which we've all heard about quite a bit. Yeah. Maybe it's woo-woo to certain people, but we've heard about it so much over the years. The body of work is there where it's kind of hard to ignore, isn't it?
Yes, in my opinion, I think undoubtedly, but there's still going to be people out there that might be interested in it, but they don't quite believe it. And I'll just give you an example that when I first got into past life healing, I did a QHHT session, and this was quite a pivotal moment for me because I was already quite receptive and open-minded to spiritual concepts. And when I did this session and I was going deep into my meditative state, I thought I was making the things up in my head. I was like, I'm seeing these images, but I think that I don't know if this is actually real or not. But then over time, it became very clear to me that it was real, but I think that we're so disconnected to this spiritual wisdom and our intuition that there's a lot of mistrust and like what to believe or not. I personally think that, yeah, we definitely experience it, but there's still a lot of people that are on that edge.
Yeah, there are. No question about that. What kind of sessions were these?
It was a QHHT session. So it was founded by a lady called Dolores Cannon. It's the quantum healing. So essentially you get brought down into a very deep meditative state and you go back to a past life, a couple of past lives to conduct healing and energy healing on that.
I remember I interviewed someone that studied under her, and apparently Dolores Cannon actually had a conversation with Nostradamus across time. There's some very interesting stories that stem from those sessions, no question. Are past lives a very influential component in your work?
Yeah, and it's actually influential to all of our lives, and a lot of people, when they aren't attuned to that as well, this is one of the very big unseen forces that could be the reason why you're not able to find love, for example, because maybe in your past life you had an extremely traumatic experience. Now, the way that past lives work, there's one linear way to look at it, where if you have a timeline and you have life 1, life 2, life 3, but our consciousness is actually much more non-linear. This is where we brought back to the more masculine way of looking and the more feminine way of looking. So the masculine way is linear, and our society looks at things in a linear fashion because of our perception of time. We see, for example, like my water bottle, it's full now, and then in the next 30 minutes, it's going to be empty. It's just the way that our brains process things. Time is just an illusion. So the feminine, which is a more non-linear way to look at things, when you look at the past life processes, essentially it's like a constellation of stars. If you imagine looking out to the universe and you see these different galaxies, you might have galaxies which represent a certain theme. And this galaxy that you're in now could be having themes such as difficulties in relationships, karmic patterns with your parents that you're needing to resolve. But there are certain themes that will follow you through your life that being influenced by essentially the constellation of past lives that are associated with that. And if you're able to resolve, heal that, this is where you can begin to liberate yourself and expand yourself as a soul.
Also, what we've heard about past lives is that what you just said about linear versus nonlinear, where they're all happening at once.
Yeah. Essentially, and look, this is also something that blows my simple mind because I am also human and look at things from a linear perspective because it's just the way that our brains process everything. But yeah, everything is happening all at once. So whether it's past or future lives, they're all happening simultaneously. So when we heal, it can go back and forth through time. This is where our consciousness can evolve in all timelines.
So in your experience with past lives, have you traversed into the in-between space in between incarnations?
Actually, I have. There's been a few times where I did a death and dying process, and this was just a meditation for myself in terms of what does that look like when I transition and finish this life. And then I met my soul family, and it was just a beautiful celebration and a liberation. That was quite an interesting experience because it made me realize just how small and dense we are. We're these massive souls that are just shoved into this tiny, tiny little dense body. And when we go through the light, it's like this shedding, and it's this transformative experience of freedom. And it's a remembrance of who you really are.
So you have seen it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because I've got some friends that have literally gone and done processes where they've done healings, because in between lives, you can make decisions as a soul. And you're still evolving as a soul as well, as you're witnessing and watching other people, other souls in your soul family. The way that you could look at it is essentially this is like a classroom. You've got your...
School?
Yeah, it's like a...
Like an earth school, yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and then you've got your soul family that are up there and you travel as souls together. I'd have a group of them which are watching my life, and they're both observing and learning, as well as my direct experience, and I'm learning and growing as a soul. It's learning as a group. And we're evolving. So when we're looking at the time in between lives, that's how we continue to evolve and grow.
So they can learn from us as well as we can learn from them. Okay. So your soul family, did you get a visual? Do they look humanoid, or are they just balls of light?
I sense into the energetic quality. So it's the essence, and it could be something like, if you think about the different people that you know in your life and the different types of personalities that they have, they'll have a certain energetic quality. Someone might be really humorous and lighthearted, whereas someone else might be quite deep and really loves to get into those deep and meaningfuls. So from an energetic standpoint, I can feel the qualities when I tune into certain ones. Plus, beyond my soul family, I also have hundreds of light beings. I've cultivated these specially curated teams to support me in different aspects of my life. And these are light beings that have traveled across different dimensions and timelines from this life, as in like Earth, to other galaxies. And they've come here and they're essentially co-creating with me. So they're here supporting me in my journey. And all of us, by the way, I call them my team. All of us come here with a team. So you might have, let's say, 5 or 7 beings that come here with your life. Some of them will travel to multiple lives with you, or sometimes they just might be here in this one. But they're here with you all of the time. And they're here to support you, to participate with you, and they're there accessible to pretty much have your back. So you're never actually alone. But for a lot of people, they don't really know that they're there and they don't know how to tune into them. So where mine differentiate is that I've expanded my team and I've invited beings that aren't my set designated ones for this particular life to expand them and to really support my journey.
The light beings sound similar, if not the same thing as spirit guides. Is there a difference?
Yeah. The spirit guides is another way to call them, and they're beings of all, types. Could be human, non-human. I've got an animal team, so there are a lot of consciousness of souls that have had that experience as an animal. So my particular team, it's got quite a shamanic, earthly yet starry quality, and they're really funny. And this is something that's just very unique to my team and especially curated to my personality. I'm just thinking at the top of my head, if I can think of a couple of my friends that have got teams, theirs might be extremely cosmic and starry and very, very high frequency. And the way that they work is much different to mine. It's just absolute delightful and pure love. It's like attracts like. And it's interesting to see how the energetic quality is reflective to my unique soul imprint and what I attract. They're essentially an extension of me. So it's a representation of like my own unique soul imprint as well.
So they're funny.
Yeah. I've actually got a funny story for you.
Yeah, I always imagine them as some being not only funny, but maybe even kind of snarky.
Yeah, they can be sassy.
Yeah, good.
And yeah, so when I first organized them, and by organizing, I mean like all of us have our teams, but they're not necessarily working in cohesion. And in the training that I've done over the years, I've organized them into a more cohesive set, essentially. So when I first set them up, I was driving home, and then out of nowhere, I just started laughing. Like a crazy person, honestly. I was in tears, And there was nothing that was said to me or that had happened that triggered my laugh, but I knew it was them that was communicating with me through my higher self. And it's happened like that a few different times where I'm facilitating someone and they've said something funny and I'm just completely compelled to just laugh. I occasionally get direct messages from them where they're sassy or they make a comment and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty funny. But yeah, that's how I know that they're funny.
Well, that's definitely something to look forward to. Not only are they there watching us, but they actually have a sense of humor. I always imagine some of the angels might be snarky and they might come across a wayward soul and one says to the other, okay, like this guy's going off the rails again. You want to help him out? No, that's okay. I did that last week. Why don't you handle this time?
Yeah.
I don't know if that exists, but I kind of hope it does, you know?
Yeah, like they know how to have a good time. It's just very much like how we all have unique personalities, or even pets. There's such a broad range of one breed of dog, and put 100 of them in the room and they've all got quite different personalities. So yeah, it's like anything really goes.
So pets too, and do they communicate with you?
There are some people out there that have very strong ability to be able to have conversations, and I am able to communicate. To a degree, all of us actually can, and I'll just give you an example that if you've got a pet at home and you know that they want to go outside, or you know that they're hungry, or that they just really want to cuddle, you're actually picking up on the subtle messaging that they're communicating with you because you're very attuned with them. With pets, I'm able to tune in. I've got one of my cats as well that is part of my team. He passed away a few years ago, and I feel his presence all the time. But that doesn't happen very often because animals, even though they have these unique incarnations in their own little body, they're also part of a collective consciousness, and they don't have the same ego attachment as what humans do. So they've got a very detached outlook towards life, and they appreciate the cyclic nature of the carbon body as well. So very pragmatic in a lot of ways and attuned with that oneness and groundedness of everything. So that particular pet, we've had multiple lives together, so it's a very deep soul connection. So yeah, since he's passed, he's definitely still present and a part of my team.
That's probably the first time I've heard someone say that one of their former pets is actually part of the spirit team. So from now on, I'm going to imagine my cat Evo as maybe he's the leader of my spirit team. He was a chocolate paw Siamese that I had for 12 years. So speaking of animals and spirit guides and angels and so on, you do work with a lot of archetypes, right?
Yes. In my book, The Inside Players, it's all about archetypes. I talk about the archetypes of manifestation because they're really great tools as dream doorways. I love going into the dreaming, and this connects back to the shamanic essence, to my soul quality. Now, with archetypes, the term was originally coined by Carl Jung, and they essentially are things that exist within the collective consciousness. So it could be archetypes, it could be symbols, it could be mythology as well. Why I love archetypes in particular is because so many of us are drawn towards narratives and stories. It's why we get swept away by certain music or movies or even novels, because we'll see certain themes. Maybe there are certain characters that resonate, or we can see a character resonating with someone that we know in our lives. So it's just an alternative way for us to be able to process these really big topics in a way that our everyday self might not necessarily be able to approach because it's a bit too confronting, or we're just thinking too linear in our everyday self. So where archetypes come in is that it gets us out of our everyday and more into that dreaming. And this is where we can access deeper doorways and where shifts can occur because we might see a particular symbol and look at things from a slightly different lens than what we could do in our day-to-day life.
So the archetypes are just as important in the journey, right? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I like them as well because with archetypes, there's a shadow and a gift. So it comes back to what I had originally said with honoring the dualistic nature of our existence. There's the dark and the light. So with the shadow, that represents our struggles, our challenges, our blocks and our pain points. And on the other spectrum is the gift to be reclaimed. So I'll just give you an example. Let's say the maiden, on one aspect, there might be naivety as a shadow, and that's just believing everything that you see. With a gift, it's like endless possibilities and dreaming. So when you're looking through the lens of an archetype, when you're embodied in the gift, this is when you're empowered. So rather than being disempowered, you'll really be able to fill the gifts and harness them in your day-to-day life, interweave them.
When anyone talks about the sacred feminine, the masculine, and the imbalance, and how it's coming back into balance, it reminds me of what everyone else means when they talk about ascension. Is there a connection there?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd spoken before about patriarchal oppression. Like, that was actually something that needed to happen. You can trace it back astrologically as well. It was just a period where we were going through quite a dense moment as a collective consciousness, essentially, with Earth. But now we're shifting. So the pendulum's swinging a little bit, and there's more feminine that's beginning to come through and create more of an equilibrium. We started seeing the shifts when Me Too started happening, even things like Black Lives Matters. These movements have to happen. These extreme movements have to happen for the pendulum to shift, and then it starts to go back, and then we start to go, back into the center, and people become a lot more open-minded when they begin to heal these deeper amounts. But with the sacred feminine in particular, people are beginning to reclaim it, feel comfortable with it. How it relates to awakening is that they say that there are some spiritual texts that say that the objective or the goal to spiritual ascension is to find equilibrium and neutrality in like a polarized world. Too much of anything, it completely dishonors the other spectrum, and what you're actually doing is denying parts of yourself. So we've been experiencing a massive imbalance with the masculine, and a lot of us see and have experienced the qualities of the distorted masculine. So these are things like overpowering, competition, taking, domination. And then with the feminine, on the other hand, it's more about receptivity, being fluid, welcoming the unknown. If there's too much of the masculine, how this manifests in day-to-day society is we create hustle culture, burnout. People are more about ownership, and how that diminishes the sacred feminine is that people don't feel comfortable claiming the sacred feminine. I have this conversation often with people that they don't feel comfortable with letting go of rigid ideas because they don't feel safe. Like, if I don't control this, then I don't know what I'm going to be receiving, which then brings me to the point that people don't feel comfortable receiving because what they have received has been unwanted. It's been traumatic or uncomfortable, or maybe they just don't feel that they're worthy of receiving. So then it further amplifies this imbalance of this rigid over-control, focusing all of this energy outward rather than being able to sit back into a state of receptivity, stillness, and inwardness.
Sounds like exactly what's happening here in the States. If any one situation defines imbalance, we're seeing it happen right in front of us. But what about moving from 3D to 5D? Is that related to this whole awakening and ascension, or is that something different?
Yeah, if we're talking about linear timelines, this isn't really a train that you can stop. It's going to happen, like the awakening process. Where we are, in 1,000 years, there's going to be much more evolved beings. So right now, especially after COVID, when we got locked down, it was a really difficult time for people. I believe that it was just something that needed to happen. It was collectively manifested. This is what happens when big processes happen. There's an element where there's a collective manifestation. So in that time, we were forced to stop, go inward, and a lot of people struggled because they weren't able to go out, focus all of the energy outward into that doing, keeping themselves busy with their work, with their social lives, with just all the things that happen with life. We were forced to be locked inside and pretty much do nothing. And it was really confronting for a lot of people. A lot of people developed these really big mental health issues. I also think that for a lot of them, it's because they had that first opportunity just to stop and actually look inside and address things that they probably were just too busy to even address. So through that stillness, it created a spaciousness for these deeper layers to emerge. And naturally, what we've seen since COVID, more people are talking about authenticity. They're surrendering these identities and these ideas. And sure, a lot of people have walked out with some struggles and mental health issues, but I've just heard consistently, in spite of that, there's actually a freedom with it because they're not living a life that's a lie or that is for other people. They're still trying to navigate and find what that looks for them, but they're on the right ship.
I think a lot of it does come from almost being forced to look within rather than outward, where it had a profound effect on them. Let's talk about awakening. If the awakening is about remembering who we are, what are we really trying to remember after all?
Well, you cannot be what you are not. In order to have this expression and to evolve as a soul, you need to forget. So while we come into these bodies, really dance, and we forget our spiritual connection to oneness, and all of these really cool things that we've spoken about with past lives and light beings, is because we need to forget who we are in order to have that soul experience and to essentially master these certain qualities. When we begin to remember, it's a homecoming, and it's so joyful. And if I bring it back to without the dark, we wouldn't have the light. So not only are we able to deepen our experience as a soul in our evolution, but there's also just that journey and that experience. And I'll give you an example. Like if you think about the journey on your favorite book, you're like, wow, I wish I could just read that again without knowing what the outcome is. So this is what our experiences are as souls when we come into these incarnations. We have to forget in order to remember and to evolve.
Forget in order to remember. And you're talking about the soul amnesia, which happens when we come back down here. I had more than a few people tell me that Earth is the only place where our souls have that amnesia when they come down here. I think what it does kind of come down to is that the awakening is about remembering what type of souls or humans we were thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and the thing is that all of us are actually a fractal of divine consciousness. And one of my favorite books about this really beautifully, about the awakening, it's called The Little Soul in the Sun. In the book, it just talks about how essentially we're a sun. And you're a little like speckle of light. The speckle of light is really nothing if you think about the sun, but the sun can't be without the speckle of light. So when we fragment off and we have these experiences, it's about evolution and it's about learning as a soul. So we have these experiences, and some human experiences are really awful. So awful to the point where people are like, how could there be a God? But it's just part of the process of evolution for the collective consciousness to learn and to experience the broad spectrum of things. And there is the darkest of dark, but there's also the lightest of light.
You can't have one without the other, it seems like.
Yeah.
Anything else we should know, at least for today?
I think that one message that I would really like to convey is that if people are really interested in this awakening journey, because this is one thing that I experienced growing up, is that I always longed for personal development and for growth, but there wasn't necessarily anything that resonated with me. I'd go to psychologists, personal development books, and all of them were just very pragmatic, but they didn't really sing to my soul. So anyone that's really searching to go and just really marinate themselves into that soul-orientated growth and awakening, the answers always lie within. There's no point going and trying to search for it outside of yourself. You might be able to find certain teachers, books, songs, whatever it is that might trigger something within you, but really the answers always fall within. If you want to accelerate your awakening, you go inwards first.
It seems to be the culmination of the hundreds or even thousand past lives that we've had where the information is all in here. Rachel, great stuff. Thanks for coming on to the podcast. In the meantime, how can our listeners find you online?
I've got an Instagram called The Spirit Magician, or my website, which is rachelchristensenofficial.com.
You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. In the meantime, you can find more information on closertovenus.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.